This paper focused on the effects of football boot upper padding on shooting accuracy and velocity performance and was published in Sports Engineering in 2002. The paper was part of my PhD and supported by experts from Loughborough University, where this study was conducted. The rationale for this study was that most football boots on the market today are marketed based on a single performance aspect that includes the power boot. The power boot is focusing on shooting performance, meaning accuracy and ball velocity. Here we have an example of a boot previously on the market with a significant upper padding, and we wanted to test the relevance of the marketing claims based on actual research. So to do this, we wanted to develop a reliable assessment tool which can also be used for assessing shooting performance of other features of football boot designs, football designs, or basic player comparisons. But in this study, we wanted to compare the shooting performance of a football boot with an padded upper using 8mm upper padding versus a non-padded football boot. So what did we do? Well, first of all, to measure shooting performance, we have to take into consider the speed accuracy trade-off. The best way to define this is a balance between the time it takes for the movement to be performed and the accuracy. So, like putting a key in the door, where the faster you move, the more likely you are to actually hit the hole in the door. So there's a fine balance between these two parameters. We also see this in other sports, such as obviously darts, but it can also be applied in shooting in football. So to take these two measures into consideration, obviously ball velocity was measured. However, accuracy can be more complex. Previously in literature, the radial offset has been used. However, we believe that it is not just radial offset, which is a measure of accuracy in football, as the direction of the offset is very important when it comes to the chance of scoring goals. So we measured accuracy through both radial offset, vertical and horizontal offset, zonal offset being the zones you see on the image in the figure on the right hand side, and basically success in goal or no goal. We use the university male football players, which are relatively high standard for university players. And we compared these two boots, which you can see in image A to D, looking very similar. Players were not told that there were any differences between the boots. And as you can see in image E and F, I've highlighted where the padding was located on the football boot. We got players in to test using them in repeated 2 sessions for test retest reliability. They tested both boots in each session and performed shots of 2 types, both times aiming for the top right corner, however, with 10 shots focusing on accuracy and 10 shots focusing on velocity. We used 2 players in each session, which was to increase the competitiveness of the players, which was really a useful tool and something I can recommend if you are comparing athletes in the future. They used a self-selected but repeated run-up and a self-selected but repeated kicking type to ensure or improve the ecological validity of the players' kicking performance. And as I said, we had 10 kicks for each boot and each instruction to avoid fatigue occurring. the setup was, and the player was placed 16, or the ball was placed 16 meters in front of the goal. A normal 11-a-side football goal was used, and this was performed on an artificial surface. And we used a TrackMan, which has been validated in a previous paper of mine as a reliable and valid tool to measure ball velocity. And we used a camera on the ball at the moment of kicking to ensure that the self-selected kicking style was repeated for every single kick. We then used 2 cameras to ensure the ball accuracy. So we had these 2 cameras synced up, one on the goal line where we could see the ball, as you can see here with the arrow, when it's passing exactly on the goal line, and the synchronized frame from a frontal view could be used to then measure the offset from the target, which was the top right corner. Key outcomes. Well, first of all, let's look at the ball velocity. So the key outcome here is that ball velocity was very similar in the 2 boots. The players performed brilliantly in terms of being very consistent throughout, which also was demonstrated through very high p-values when comparing the 2 boots. Should also mention that we did, as you can see on all the tables, a retest assessment of consistency between the 2 sessions, and found fairly good results for this, ensuring that this test is reliable for measuring ball velocity. When looking at offset, let's look at zonal offset first. So we had 4 zones, zone 1, 2, 3, and 4. Zone 3 is where goals are scored. Any other zone, the ball is missing above or wide of goal. So first, let's look at shots missed right above. So as you can see here with the non-padded boot, we had above 30% missed. However, when we looked at the padded boot, we have a significantly higher amount of goals missed right above goal, and that led to more goals being scored in the non-padded boot compared to the padded boot. So basically, the padded boot created less goal scoring chances. When we then break it down in terms of radial, horizontal, vertical, and offsets, we can see that the vertical offset for both accuracy and velocity shots were significantly higher in the padded boot, which was related to the zonal offset we saw before, where more goals were missed. No difference was seen from radial offset or horizontal offset, also indicating that radial offset is not enough to consider when looking at accuracy of kicks in football. Finally, as I mentioned before, more goals were scored in the unpadded boot compared to the padded boot, again highlighting that this feature, which is seen on shooting or shooting focused boots, actually has a negative effect on goal scoring opportunities. So the take-home message from this study, well, if a player would come to me and ask me if they should buy a power boot based on the upper padding feature, I would say, well, why should you? Because based on our study, there's no positive effects of doing so. However, we should be honest and highlight the limitations of this study, which are that obviously there is no adaptation period, which might have changed the way that the players behaved around the football boot, so might have adapted better. We only used 1 boot design and 1 padding type. And of course, the study is limited to the player sex and the level that we assessed. I need to acknowledge that the Umpro supported the football boots used in the study, and here's a list of other outputs around football boots that this group has produced. Thank you very much for listening in.